And good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. Look around. You made it through the week. Everything's still in one piece. Good job. We're proud about everything that you do. So if you work in food safety or quality assurance or anything involved with getting that food out the door and making all of us happy and healthy, thank you. Joyce and I want to at least say that today is we really appreciate all that you do. Because as we know in what we do, Joyce, and this is super true, right? Is if we do a good job at what we do, nobody notices because everything is just going smooth. And then the problem comes up and they say that phrase that we all hate, oh, we had a quality problem, right? No, we didn't. No quality problem. It was an operational problem. Anyway, if you're here, welcome. This is the Food Safety Chat. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group, and every week I have the pleasure of bringing on an expert in food safety to get their perspective on a particular topic. And really, we do this for you because the idea here is to share information because, as we all know, I'm sure Joyce will agree with this as well, it's food safety is not a point of competition because the consumer doesn't care. If they're in the mood for cheesecake, they expect all those cheesecakes to be fantastic and they don't really look at who is manufacturing necessarily. And if there's a problem, all cheesecake gets blamed. So we need to be working together to make these things work out correctly. And so with that, of course, I'm very excited here to bring on a new guest here on the chat, Joyce Watford, the Vice President of Food Safety, Quality, and Regulatory. Wow, you're wearing a lot of hats there. And she's with Eli's Cheesecake Factory in the Chicago area. Joyce, how you doing?
Oh, wonderful. I'm very excited to be on this. I was very fortunate that one of my brokers, Sanal, nominated me. And then when we started to talk and we started talking about traceability and the traceability law and how do we all understand it and how does it apply, it's a good topic to talk about, and you've given me a lot of good insight. And unfortunately, I missed the food safety summit yesterday and the whole talk about this. So I'm hoping that, even though we're talking about it, maybe some people have some comments to enlighten us.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's the really cool part about what we do here on the chat is sharing of information. So one of the things that we always do when we start off the chat here is where you're at in the world. So I'm in Loveland, Colorado. Beautiful Loveland by Fort Collins, where it's been a little cool. And I'm definitely in your neck of the woods, Joyce, has been the same thing. When I left Chicago yesterday, raining really hard in that area. So,
yes, I'm in Chicago, and it hasn't been very nice lately, but that's okay. We're going to get some good weather soon, and at least we're seeing green trees and flowers blooming, and so hopefully the rain subside soon, and then all of a sudden it'll be scorching hot.
Exactly. So it's always amazing. So I went out to the Food Safety Summit. So I was very fortunate. Trace Gaines asked me to come out and work with them. So I met with a lot of their clients on Monday where they showed some of the new modules that they're launching. So they launched, a brand new Kappa module within Trace Gaines, which looked really cool. And then at the show, we were able to do some stuff there. So at the end of the chat here, I'll give everybody a little more information on what we did at the Food Safety Summit. Really good attendance too, Joyce. So I think they said over 1,300 people were at the summit, which is fantastic. And so I think coming out of COVID now, we're getting back to normal and we're getting out and we're meeting with each other again. So I was able to say hello and have chats with people I haven't seen in quite a while. So that was awesome. Because I mean, part of it too, right? There's that face-to-face interaction is so important, and being able to just sit down with somebody you haven't seen in a while and kind of do like what we're doing here today, Joyce, and talking about, hey, what you've been doing on these type of things, or did you just listen to that session? Wow, right? It's pretty crazy. So we got a ton of stuff to go over here today. So with that, join Joyce and I. Whoop, that was my coaster hitting the floor for a drink of your favorite beverage. I got some coffee. What you got there, Joyce?
Water.
Some good old water. Cheers, everyone. You're being better than me. Ah, very nice. Oh, I need that coaster. There we go. I got a little coffee on the bottom. It stuck to it. There we go. So with the Food Safety Summit, I was able to sit in on our topic today. They had an amazing discussion with FDA and a large panel from different industries, jam-packed room around enhanced traceability and what's going on with that. And that's our subject for today is enhanced traceability. But with that, Joyce, because you're new to the chat, and I'm sure people are very curious about you. So why don't you give everybody a little of your background and kind of your career path to date?
Well, I've been in food manufacturing about 25 years, but before that, for 5 or 6 years, I actually graduated from Purdue with a degree in microbiology, immunology, and worked at Silica, which is now
Oh.
bioMérieux, food testing. And so I learned more about micro than I ever knew with food. Um, and there's many times where people don't want to hear me talk about the serology of salmonella or listeria. So from that experience, I was able to consult with food companies and was like, I don't want to work in the lab anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So slowly but surely, I integrated into the food industry, manufacturing, first with a co-packer 20 some years ago, Omar Packaging, and then
Mm-hmm.
subsequently other companies. And about 8 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, I came to Eli's to implement SQF.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really all I was hired for. And I'm still here. So, it was changing a culture, teaching them about all of these, allergens and traceability and um, these prerequisite programs and updating HACCP. So I learned a lot through this, and I've really changed the culture into more of a food safety culture where people really are aware. And I really like when people come to me and say, hey, I think, somebody is going to put the wrong thing in, or they wrote the wrong thing down, or, hey, we needed more utensils because we're out of like the green for tree nuts. And, just having that culture and people asking questions and me making sure that I'm out on the floor so that people can ask questions and they can feel
Yeah.
comfortable asking those questions, because I'm more than happy to educate, because I do learn from the people on the floor where um, maybe I write a policy, but I'm out on the floor and realize that doesn't make sense. Let me integrate what you do. So I've learned a lot and have interacted with so many people, and just getting more involved in just talking about traceability and allergens, all the different FDA, things that have come across with even, the preventative controls really, has enhanced my experience here, because we're a bakery and I have come from thermal processing. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, so many good things you just said. Um, so food safety and building your culture in companies, in that simple act of getting the members on the floor to come up to you and say, "Hey, Joyce, I got a problem." Yeah, what you got? Well, I need some more allergen tools for the green. You got it. Let me go me get. That's huge. Right? It's almost like that parent who says, "Hey, listen, if you're out and you kind of get in trouble, don't be afraid to call me." And then they call. It's like, yes, right. It's trust, and building out that trust and understanding that no, we're not going to yell at you. This is what we need to be doing because we're all working on this together as a team and within quality. So number one, congratulations to you, because getting to that point where people don't view us in quality and food safety as the police, right? All right, you guys need to do that's huge. So nice job. That's really good to hear. One of the things here, guys, is put some comments in here to let us know that you're listening. I want to make sure that the comments are working here correctly. So let us know where you're at in the world. We greatly appreciate your input on this, because again, this is for you. And as you have questions, as we're going through the discussion here today, fire them off, and Joyce and I will do our best to give our interpretation of what's going on there. So with the enhanced traceability, so I was fortunate enough, as I said, at the conference to sit in on the enhanced traceability session. So FDA was there talking about that. They gave a really good slide at the end, which I was able to grab. And I've got this here in the link, and I'll put that up here later as it kind of fits into the conversation on some resources around enhanced traceability. But as we always like to do here on the chat, Joyce, is it's always good to kind of set your baseline of what is it that we're actually talking about. So what is enhanced traceability, often referred to as 204, right? We're getting into the, quality. We love our lingo. So what have you been looking at, and what is really catching your eye around enhanced traceability?
Well, I've been rereading the rule just to kind of see, where I fall. But, it's not just, I think there's manufacturers, there's, people who do produce and things like that. Where does everybody fall in? But, just trying to understand the acronyms is
Yeah.
number one for me. What is KDE, key data elements? What are CTEs? What are critical tracking elements? Or events, I'm sorry. So, we do know that this rule is so that the FDA and CDC can respond quickly to outbreaks and issues so we can minimize them so that there's not more people affected. And, we're talking about best practices for, domestic and, anything brought in the foreign firms, firms with the foreign verification. So, then there's the list of ingredients that are on the list, but then you have to look at, what exactly do you do? Are you a transformer? Are you a farmer? So those are the things that I'm trying to familiarize myself to figure out how does that apply to our firm, but also how does that affect my customers? How does that affect my suppliers? What am I going to require from someone else? What is someone else going to require from me? And how to incorporate that here. I think everybody, if you're in the food safety,
Oh, a little bit of a freeze there. Hopefully this will fix itself. While we're waiting for Joyce to come back, Tim, thank you. Appreciate it, Tim. You're back, Joyce?
yes, sorry.
There you are. Oh, that's okay. These things happen. No worries.
Well, I don't have the fancy microphone setup or anything. Yeah, I'm just at my desk. So, how does this all affect us, and how does it affect my suppliers? How does it affect our customers? How can we all work together to have, and collaborate so we all are working on, on the same playing field? And it's been good having conversations with people, but with this list of what's included, what's not included, you start to, what do I do? Do I transform? Am I a farmer? Am I a distributor? Trying to figure all that out. And it's really good when you start talking to other people, because I may interpret it one way and someone else may interpret it another way, because then you have kill steps and things like that. So just kind of sorting through. So I just want to make sure that I'm serving my supplier and mostly my customer, but also the consumers, so that the consumers can feel comfortable with my brand, to know that if something happens, that we know where the issue lies.
There are so many important points in what you just talked about. So we'll try and kind of roll this out. So a big one around this, and number one, and this is always, guys, this is always where you have to start. Whenever you're looking at implementing a new system, and Joyce, when you came into Eli's and said, hey, listen, we need to build out an SQF system, rule number one is you have to say, okay, well, what are the rules of the game, as I call it? So what SQF standard am I following? What food sector category do my products fall into? What certification body am I going to be using for this? What do I need to put in place, and start doing that gap assessment, and what programs do I have in place, and what things don't I have, and what do I need to build out to get ready for this? It's exactly the same with this. So you need to start with enhanced traceability. You need to understand, what is FDA looking for? And within this, to your point, it's absolutely perfect, is all right, these key data elements and these tracking events, and who is managing all this information, getting your arms around this so that we can figure out what exactly we need to do. And it always comes back, and this really ties in very nicely to the successes you've had at Eli's. Blocking and tackling, I call it. Are people washing their hands correctly? Are people wearing their hairnets, to the point earlier? Are people coming up and telling me if there's issues on the floor? Those type of interactions. we think a lot of times that creating fancy documents is what people need, and it's not. It's that interaction and that understanding, to your point, Joyce, which you said very well, explaining the why. Here's why you need to wash your hands. Here's why we care about these things. Here's why you need tools that are allergen specific for different things. We can't mix these things up, and making sure that everybody understands, because sometimes we just assume they do, and they really don't, because we're human beings. And so if you come up to me, Joyce, and explain something to me, and you're like, do you get it? I just may go, yeah. Because I just want this to end, right? I'm like, okay, sure. And then later I'll go talk with my buddies and say, well, what are we supposed to be doing, right? And we don't want that. We want that open interaction. So really with that around enhanced traceability, that's figuring out that context, because we have to be able to go back and tell the story to FDA or customers or whoever comes in to audit us of what it is that we do to control this, why we do it that way, and then here's the proof of that we actually did it. Plan, do, check, act. That's what everybody is always looking for. So understanding that is super important. And at that conference on enhanced traceability, there was quite a few members on the board that were speaking, Joyce, from produce and restaurants. And it's always super beneficial to get that perspective from other industries, because you and I are very similar, right? Manufacturing, dairy-based products, these type of things, right? We have that commonality in similar. And it's always good to look at the perspectives from other types of products and how they're handling these. And the representative of the produce group made a very important point, which I think everybody needs to keep in consideration, is he said, and you talked about this, is you need to think about this as a thread that runs through the entire process. So you have at the beginning, let's say non-fat dry milk that you're purchasing for your product. You need to be able to track that and say, oh, okay, for this lot of non-fat dry milk, here's where it came from, here's how it comes in, here's how it transformed within this process, here's where it went to the finished product, here's where it goes out to retail. And the key difference with this is, instead of looking at all this forward, right, the one forward, one back that we're so used to, is we need to think about it in terms of consumer back. And that's what FDA wants, because they got burnt. Right? FDA is tired of getting consumer complaints and then being unable to find out where the heck the stuff came from, or taking a really long time to backtrack that supply chain. So we need to your point, think about this as an entire system, and getting together with these different groups from the retailer all the way back to say, how do we create these threads that run through these materials and finished products to make sure we can quickly track these? Is that a good summary, or does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, and I see poor Tim is trying to move around. Yeah, the weather's been terrible, and I was lucky yesterday getting out of Chicago. So good luck, Tim. So with those key data elements, so as the manufacturer of the food, Joyce, you're at the center of the storm, right?
Yes. Lucky me. Well, all of us who are manufacturers.
Yeah, and so looking at this and then trying to figure out something as simple as, let's say, lot code. And so at Eli's, let's talk about your finished product. You have a lot code that you use to track that. And how does that work through the system? And as you go upstream, does that lot code actually carry along? Is that the best way to track things? A lot of times companies have very complex lot codes. So at WhiteWave, our lot codes were gigantic, because it would tell the time and the line and the plant and the filler, all kinds of great stuff for us to use and figure out from a traceability standpoint. But if we're expecting the consumer or the retailer to transcribe all that information back to us, probably not going to work too well. So what are we doing relative to coming up with a lot code? They were talking a little bit, Joyce, about using the barcodes, the GS1 and things like this, which already has systems in place. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of talk about blockchain. I know that's been kind of floating out there around that as well. So what are your thoughts around that?
I know for a while when this initially first came up, the blockchain was just a huge topic. And
Yeah.
I know one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, we just have a simple, code either on our case or our product, but as you said, maybe using that GS1 that
Mhm.
includes so much. That way you don't have a customer going, well, this is the number, and I don't quite know what it means, or they throw out the packaging and
Yeah.
it's not on there. So we have to think about, where to put it so that a customers can just or scan it, or even if it's a QR code that has the information. Those are things we're thinking about is, first let's make sure everything's traceable backwards, forwards, and then
Right.
um, making sure that our customer now has a tool that they can scan that QR code. And years ago, I worked at a co-manufacturing company, and we actually had a supplier who had a gluten-free flour, and there
Mm.
was a QR code on the back, and it actually showed what farm it went to.
Wow.
And it's like, do they want that level? I don't know how you can get that detail, but it's something that we've been talking here about is, we handle this one end, but what are we going to do to make sure you know our food service, our retail customers know what this is? And then how does a consumer look at this and say, I don't understand, but maybe I can scan it and get the information.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a very good point, because part of this, and there's two things that I took out of what you were saying here, which is super important, is that you have to be able to do this fast. So if FDA, as the holder of the key data elements and those critical tracking events, you're on the hook, and you need to be able to get that information back to FDA in 24 hours. So it's like, okay, you start thinking about this. It's like, okay, that information coming from the retail side or the consumer side or wherever it starts needs to get back to me so that I can get that information back to FDA. So how does that work? And figuring that out. The other key piece of this then is looking internally. And my advice around this too is be careful with that, because we're so used to trying to manage this ourselves. This is a situation where that's not the case. But you need to look at this in terms of, okay, so for my documentation, I got a lot of paper, right? And we're all guilty of this. This isn't going to work. If all of my information is on paper and I have to go digging around and go talk with the logistics guys or the procurement people to find all this stuff out, that 24 hours is going to run out really fast. So part of this, I think, is in the industry and manufacturers. We need to be thinking about how we're transforming our system of data management too.
And just, we all know that we have the paper backup
Mhm.
of everything, but who wants to look through all of that
Yeah.
to get that now? And something else, as I keep rereading the standard is, for the longest time I interpreted as it needs to be electronically traceable, but they also talk about paper records with this
Mhm.
now, which I don't think they initially did, or if they did, I missed that. So I was like, well, okay, we have tons of paper, but it takes a lot. Sometimes it takes, let's say you have to look up citric acid or something that you add like 0.1 gram to a bunch of batches and you have thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
That's going to take more than 24 hours to pull that paperwork. So yes, electronically, when you can just see it on your screen, so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sanal's making this point as well. So good to see you. The data has to be sortable. To your point, Joyce, is if you have to, you get this giant stack of paperwork, or you have to go down to the archives with all the, that's not going to help. And I think Cortland here as well is making a good point.
Yes.
We need to look at other industries. In medical device, each unit is uniquely labeled and allows for traceability, and pharma is doing a similar different type of identification. So medical device and pharmaceutical have very sophisticated programs around these type of things that could potentially be applied to what we're doing here. So again, this is something we talk about a lot, which is Don't reinvent the wheel. We need to figure this traceability piece out.
And I like Cortland's comments about what they're doing in medical devices and pharma, because maybe that somehow or another we all start to work together. So we have something in common, because we really serve the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in business to serve a consumer. So, having a unified system that we all can, number one, incorporate, but customers can understand, gives them a lot more confidence in our industries.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's a good segue for my next question, Joyce, is I think you need to look at this in terms of channels as well. So with Eli's, so huge company, and you sell to lots of different people. So you have retail, club, right? So Costco and Sam's deal with things differently than retailers. Food service, how are you going to be dealing with food service? One of the topics that was a big point of discussion with the panel on enhanced traceability was restaurants. I'm sitting there listening to the restaurant discussions. Can you imagine trying to track from the restaurant level back?
I can't, and we sell to restaurants.
Yeah.
We sell to airlines.
Yeah. Co-packers. So let's say someone who you're working with who is making a product for somebody else and you're selling them some materials or things and they're transforming that. Who in that particular situation owns the data? Do you own it? Or does the transformer who is producing this product, are they responsible for the key data elements? To your point as well, Joyce, here's another huge one. E-commerce. What if people are selling? And I have clients where this pops up, where you'll be on Amazon looking around, their product is for sale on Amazon and they're not selling it. Who is? And how did they get that product? And why are they selling it? When it comes to food products and other things like this, you have to be very careful on Amazon about what you're buying.
Yeah. And so, you bring up the e-commerce. We have our own website. We sell through Goldbelly. And those are things like, okay, how are we going to make that traceable? I mean, right now, and we have a mail order business as well from our website. So we do track who gets what lot of product, but is that consumer able to actually interpret what that means? No. And if they throw the packaging away, they don't, they don't always have that information.
Right. So yeah. So a cheesecake that you guys manufacture goes to a food service distributor, goes to their warehouse, goes to distribution points, goes on a truck, goes out to a restaurant who then prepares a special crumbled cheesecake fondue recipe, super awesome, really bad for you, the product. And that all has to be tracked back to you as one of the ingredients within that product, because within that, and so we were talking about this a little bit before we started on the show. Yes, within your process for manufacturing cheesecake, we know the elements around FSMA of the controls and what are the kill steps and these type of things. But the restaurant doesn't have those, right? You have the chef in the back who is, making the stuff and what's going on that side. It's going to be interesting because part of it, and you hear this like with deli meats and things like this, Joyce, is FDA talked about this a little bit, and then they really didn't talk about it much more, is a lot of the pathogen type issues associated with deli meats comes from retail. And that 18-year-old kid who's working behind the counter with the slicer, who's maybe not doing a very good job of cleaning and tracking that back and figuring that out. I think in the long run, that's going to benefit us as manufacturers, because we'll be saying, okay, well, yeah, there was an issue and this is awful and we'll get this taken care of, but it's not the product's fault. It's downstream. So maybe we'll be able to start identifying some of those things.
And I do think, as we're talking about all these channels, they're looking from us as their supplier for a solution, rather than, they're looking for us. They're not telling us this is what you have to do. They're not saying this is the program that we want. They're just saying, how are you going to do this? Because we're looking to you to be able to do this for us, because we're, and that's how it works down, as you said, downstream throughout this whole kind of thread. Everybody's relying on someone else to give them the right information.
Exactly. And to Duncan's point here, and good morning, afternoon, Duncan in
Yeah.
Europe, so good afternoon to you, sir. Um, all this comes down to your ability to rapidly transmit and receive batch information. A QR code, yep, it can be used, but isn't interpretable by human. And then the way that's decipherable. So I don't think it's important for lot codes to be decipherable. I agree. I agree. Because part of this, and Joyce referenced this as well earlier, which I think is a really good insight, is if we're relying, and we've all seen this when you work at food manufacturers and you have customers and consumers. So the difference is a customer would be like a retailer. So let's say Kroger. The consumer is the person who actually consumes your product. So the end user of that, the person who's, oh, I don't know, drinking the cup of coffee. Um, and when we try and get information back from consumers, let's say that we have complaints, it's pretty hit or miss. Hey, I need the lot code, or I need this. And you talked about this earlier, Joyce, as well. Do they even still have the product? A lot of times when you have a complaint, especially on beverages or things like this, the container's open and it's been sitting in the fridge for a week. What else is going on in there, right? If you have teenage kids, are they taking the gallon of milk and drinking from the carton? And you go, ew, okay, I'm throwing that out. So part of that is figuring all those things out and looking at it. So Duncan
I,
had got some good comments going. I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I like Cortland's comment about farmers markets.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good one too.
yeah, really. I don't know. Maybe that Cortland should be on the as a guest in the chat. He has a lot of insight here.
Oh yeah, Cortland's always great. Yeah, so he always
And
provides some really
Duncan
good insight.
too.
Yeah, these two guys, yeah, they when they're not giving me crap, they're good for comments. So with that, yeah, so Duncan here is talking about as well. But let's talk about that farmers market one for a little bit as well. So I kind of view this as farmers market. There's two main categories I look at farmers markets, like true farmers markets. You're in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and you're driving down the road, and the Amish farm has the thing set up by the side of the road with the awesome pies and fresh fruits and things, right? And they wheeled it down the road, and you can see where it came from. A lot of other farmers markets, especially in larger cities, are kind of farmers markets, right? When you look behind the back, there's pallets of product and they're taking it out of boxes and they're presenting it as if it comes directly from a farm, but probably not. But to Cortland's point, they need to track this too. How are they going to do that?
Yeah.
And let's see. So here, keep the comments coming, guys. So traceability details should be an attribute of the distributed goods. So the traceability detail would be attached. Yeah. So kind of like what people have been thinking about blockchain. Ideally, food businesses should have the responsibility for maintaining packets of information. Yeah. And really that kind of comes back to, and Duncan, we're thinking along the same lines here, that thread, right? That thread running through the process all the way to the consumer is what we need to build. So that needs to be built at two different levels, is finished product and the materials. To your point, Joyce, that minuscule ingredient within that product that's used in all kinds of stuff. That's one of our biggest risks, is sometimes these lots, if you're getting in citric acid or something like this, low risk, but high exposure. So if that citric acid supplier comes back to you and says, hey, guess what? Oops.
Yeah.
That lot we sent you last year, yeah, we just found out we had a problem with it. And that's worst case scenario right there.
Yeah, not a good example. Citric acid, of course, doesn't fall on anything, but it's always one of those ingredients that's so minor in your batch that somebody asks you to lot trace an ingredient from something and they pick that and you're like, oh, thanks.
Exactly. Well, I think part of this too, and this is something I've been kicking around, I'd be curious what people on the chat think about this as well, is everything that we do in our food safety programs is based on a hazard assessment. What's the likelihood and the severity? So we can't boil the ocean. So maybe what we need to do is start with, okay, what are the high risk things that we really need to be worrying about? What are those finished products that, and this is kind of what FDA did with the rule, right? Is essentially they did their own risk assessment and said, okay, we're most worried about these materials. So leafy greens, certain types of fresh cut fruit, high risk dairy products, like soft ripened cheeses, things like this. it's coming to everything else, but maybe that is the right way to approach it and use those high risk elements as a pilot program. What do you kind of think about that, Joyce?
You know, because I'm struggling with, that part as well, because we use cream cheese. It's a soft cheese, but it doesn't come in like a raw, it's cultured. It has kill step. And then we have a kill step too in it with our baking, and it's frozen. So how exactly, how do I fit into that? And so I struggle with that list, because we use ricotta, we use mascarpone, that fall on the list. And then I know that there's some vegetables and things in there. So we have a carrot cake, and we have carrots in there, but we bake the cake, but we use it as a topping.
Yeah.
So I have it in two different, forms, as the carrots on top, and they're fresh carrots.
Right.
And then I have it inside. So I look at it like, okay, where's the line? Do you just go, I'm just doing everything to just cover it, or do I do exceptions? Because they've given you those whole exceptions, and they have that kind of tool on their website that tells you whether you fall into it or not.
Right, exactly. And I mean, the bottom line on this is, so a word of caution is, so as quality and food safety people, we're proactive people. And what we're doing right now is indicative of that. We like to get ahead of the curve and see what's coming. We're the group in the company that's looking at the horizon and saying, what do we need to be worried about that's coming up? And this is coming up pretty fast, right? It's less than 2 years now. And with that, number one is we want to jump in and say, okay, I'll fix it. I'll fix this. But you only have, and this is always true, you only have so much control, right? So within the sphere of what you do, Joyce, you have your company and the materials you supply and these type of things. But to our earlier point, I keep wanting to make sure that this gets emphasized, because I've seen this happen time and time again, is we need to break out of that. And we need to think in terms of the entire supply chain and how other people are managing this. And taking a look at that and bringing your knowledge to the table, Joyce, and saying, hey, listen, we make cheesecakes. And in that cheesecake, we have these materials. We have cream cheese, and we have these type of materials. And with cream cheese, right, as a cream cheese manufacturer, I probably supplied you in the past at the Bon Grain Cheese. And I know that cheese is cooking at 175 degrees. Ain't nothing getting through there, right? If I'm doing my job as your supplier, it's going to be a good ingredient. And so part of your responsibility is making sure that I'm supplying you with that good stuff. Now, just like ice cream, why is ice cream so risky? So you have the base, and that's pasteurized. You have the ice cream mix, and then they whip it up. The problem is everything that they add in afterwards, all those goodies, the fudge and the gummy bears and the sprinkles and everything else that aren't going through a kill step. And with cheesecake, similar type thing, right? There's all these amazing variants and all these really decadent ways to take that base cheesecake and add chocolate syrup and fruits and carrots and all these type of things. And then that's going through the supply chain. So managing those is really important. And we saw this with this recent issue with cinnamon. So you're making these applesauce products for children and all these type of things. And is that cinnamon really controlled? And that industry found out within that, no, right? And FDA went out and found more sampling and found more issues. So these things can quickly balloon.
Yes.
So great comments, guys, coming here. Nice. I always love it too, Joyce, when the conversations between our guests here on here and the audience. So look at all right. So software traceability, absolutely. The things blockchains contributed and really around the blockchain. And so Duncan's really an expert in this space, so it's really good to get his input. I think blockchains contribute is the concept of nodes in the distribution ledger. You can think of every commercial entity in the supply chain as a node, which incurs, amends, and attaches. And so this is why I say Duncan's smart. Yeah, this is why it's important in what we do. We don't have to know everything, and that's a hard thing sometimes for us to admit, but we have to have a network of people out there who do have this information. There's other people who are way smarter than me on this subject who are working on this too. So what are they doing and how are they approaching this? And so what Duncan is saying here is a perfect example of that. So thanks, Duncan. That's some very forward thinking. I appreciate that. Good information for everybody. Cortland's bringing up, the complete risk assessment. So we need to go back and look at this again. And here, Gulam, I'm sure I'm probably hacking up your name, no, so apologies. Cortland totally agreed. Traceability of daily direct supply of fruits and veg is highly neglected, both the consumer and the supplier end. It needs attention. Yeah, exactly. And so part of the challenges in those industries is time. So you're out in the field, you harvest the spinach, it goes to the processor, and they got to get that stuff to the store like now. They don't have time to wait for micro testing or other type of things. They're dependent upon their system to supply that safe product.
And as you talk about the systems, we all with HACCP have done our ingredient assessments, risk assessments. We've done our process risk assessments. So we build the food safety and quality within the system. Yeah. So when you do that, you start to go, okay, some things are just a lot less risky. And, it really helps when you really look at your risk assessments to go, okay, we've built this in the system. And, that also helps when I have a complaint or something with a customer when they, I got sick or I had an allergen from this. And like, we don't have sesame, period, in our organization. And, we have a kill step. We freeze our product. So the likeliness of you getting sick from this within 15 minutes is very low. But let me take your information and explain to you why it can't, because we've done our risk assessments. And, I don't know if anyone else has had the FDA, 4 or 5 years ago, when they were coming in and checking your preventive control programs. Uh-huh. And they went through ours and very detailed. And, one of the things we looked at was the risk assessment for ingredients. And they said, oh, you're very consistent with what we recommend. And I said, well, yeah, because I used your resource to do that. Uh-huh. And they're like, well, some of these things, maybe you don't need that for cream cheese. Maybe you don't need this. Like you might have went a little over on some. So they were very, very helpful. And that has helped to strengthen our programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good point, Joyce, because part of, and this is going to happen again. So when FSMA was introduced, essentially what happened is a curtain was pulled back. FDA had very little access to HACCP plans. FDA had access to records relative to interstate commerce, PMO compliance, LACF, seafood HACCP, these type of things. Yeah. But if you fell outside of that, sharing that information with FDA was voluntary. FSMA came along, surprise, everything, and this is something I always emphasize, everything in your food safety plan is fair game. And FDA, I think, has done a great job, Joyce, of educating themselves. So they now understand, 10 plus years down the road now, what the risks are with different materials. And we're seeing this in the appendix, right? So Appendix 1 for hazard analysis, the guidance FDA very graciously put together, has been highly modified and put together. And we did a talk around Appendix 1 and the changes associated with that. Gives us that baseline for looking at this information. Conversely, FDA also now understands by manufacturing category risk. So they know if you're a fluid plant or a cheese maker or a cheesecake manufacturer or a produce processor or things, they understand now the relative risks of these different industries and where those buckets fit in, and they're using their resources appropriately. Foreign supplier verification, same thing happened. We're all familiar with educate before regulate. So once the rule took effect and they were going out and working with people on foreign supplier, they gave people a lot of passes, right? So if it wasn't directly a food safety issue, it's like, okay, hey, you guys need to fix this. You need to understand importer of record. You need to understand how the customs system works and the coding and what's eligible for, let's say, R&D nomenclature within that system, all that type of stuff. And we're not here to talk about foreign supplier verification. But the point is, the FDA went into it and said, okay, here's what you need to do. We're going to help you out. and get you to understand these things. Well, that door's closed. And we see as a result here, the number of 43s that FDA is issuing around foreign supplier verification non-compliance. They are hammering a lot of people because now they're making a little bit of pain for the industry so that they get in gear and figure these things out. And it's very easy for FDA to do these audits. They're just picking up the phone and calling you, right? They're going into the Customs and Border Protection system and saying, hi, you're the importer of record. We want to see your information. You got 24 hours. You have to comply. Guess what? Same thing's going to happen here with enhanced traceability. And FDA on the panel indicated that, yeah, there's going to be a period of time here at the beginning where they're going to follow kind of that model. Did they use that exact language? No, I think it's too early in the process. FDA needs to figure out the landscape and how people are reacting to this and what we're putting together. Because guess what? It's us, right? FDA said you need to do this, but it's up to us to figure out how to do it.
Isn't that nice how they do that for us?
Yeah.
They let us interpret to make sure, they could give us mechanisms, but no, here, and we're going to put it in these terms that it's very loose and.
Yeah. Well, and it's positives and negatives for sure. So what's that saying, right? They're giving us the rope to hang ourselves with. So we need to make sure that we got enough slack in that rope that we don't actually end up on, hanging around too much. So with that, it's always really important too, and that's a good point, Joyce, is FDA is a regulatory enforcement agency. They are not manufacturers. They have a better understanding now of how we do things, but we're the experts. And so we need to figure this out. Let's see, Rapid Micro. Cortland has, what's really cool about having Cortland on here is he brings a different perspective, right? He's got that medical device and pharma perspective, which I appreciate. I recommend using an RX 360 system for foods and imports. So I have no idea what that means.
And
so
I was wondering why he was referencing my car model.
So Cortland, if you have a link or a brief description for everybody, that would be awesome because you're outside of our knowledge base. So please help us out here. Yeah,
I feel like Cortland has so much experience and input on this that he's going to have his own short course for everybody.
Yep. And so he says here he's working on import holds. Yeah, there's a lot of those. And also around foreign supplier, not to get too far off the track here, but sometimes the information they have relative to your research around import holds or issues where people have been banned is not true. So you need to make sure that information is correct. I had a customer I worked with recently. One of my clients, they were buying some product and looking at a new supplier from overseas, and they were on the FDA import list, and they had no idea. And it turned out that it was a mistake. So,
wow.
Yeah. So you need to, it's that old saying, trust but verify. So make sure that information is correct that you got. So as you're kind of looking at this, so who do you think, Joyce, are some of kind of those key people we need to partner with on this to solve this problem? Because again, this isn't just us. Who are you kind of thinking based on your research?
I think that, we really too talking to our suppliers, and, finding out what are you doing and working with our customers as well. Like, what do you need? What do you see? From what's your consumer feedback? Because, we're not always talking to the consumer. So yeah. I don't always, on some things that we sell, at maybe our store or something, yes. But most people, or if it's our mail order or e-commerce, but we're not really knowing what the consumer needs or wants. So it's really working with our customers and our suppliers to find out, what works best. And, I know some people, depending on your ERP system, you might have a good way of doing these things already. Yeah. So, but, also, is there a way to electronically do this easier or better? Maybe there's some services out there that we can reach out to.
And that's a really good point. And so one of the things, and I'll include this, guys, on the locals page, is at the FDA presentation on traceability that I was at. This is one of the slides that they had. And I apologize. This is a little bit small, so it's hard to read, but I'm not going to be clicking on these links anyway. And again, I'll put this information in the community group on locals so that you can access this. So at the end of their presentation, these are some of the traceability resources that they recommended. So within here is, of course, the FDA tools, and I do have that link for everybody. So start with this page. And this actually came up during the discussion at, with Q&A at the end of the talk, is one of the admonitions of the panel members was, be careful. There's a lot of resource material out there and a lot of different sources. Be careful. And their kind of their guidance relative to this was, don't go too far down the rabbit hole with these different types of resources. Figure out what's right for you, what's right for the industry that you're working in, and then focus in on that. And then look at the other industries to make sure that things are matching up for guidance as well. So I thought that was some good advice from them. So the main page with FDA is the link that I just put in the chat. Within here as well, and you'll notice what they're doing here is, so we have in here the Global Food Traceability Center. Was I aware of this resource? Nope. Right. So this is through IFT, which is great. So FMI, so Food Marketing Institute. So they have some really good resources. So Hogan Lovells, if you're not familiar with Hogan Lovells, they're a law firm in DC that focuses in on food safety. And quick plug here for Hogan and Lovells, Martin Hahn, Miley Hermida, the gang over there. Miley and Martin have been my go-to food safety lawyers at companies for years and years. They're really amazing. There's also good ones out there, Sean Stevens. Right? There's really good food safety lawyers out there that you can talk with. And what's great about those guys is they have very wide perspectives, and they're looking at this as an industry. So they give us an additional advantage on that side. The NRA, National Restaurant Association, some of their best practices. So that was a huge topic of discussion on the panel, Joyce, was restaurants. And for me, that was just, right, I can't even imagine. So they were talking about food prep. Well, what if I use 2 different lots of basil when I'm preparing a product for the consumer, right? So very similar things that we're thinking about in manufacturing, because lots of times we're using multiple lots of ingredients. So a lot of their information in there as well. Fresh produce, the International Dairy Foods Association. If you work in dairy, we love IDFA. They're a fantastic organization, and they have a guidance checklist here. So with Joyce working in that space with Cheesecakes, a very good resource there. Also some very good traceability. And as we were talking about earlier, GS1. So again, I'll get these links out to everybody on that page so that you have those resources.
And the NRA show is coming up just in like next weekend, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to the show, I'll see if there's, any type of resources, or, everybody else can talk about products, but I'll try to find someone that I can talk to traceability about. I don't know if they'll have that, there's so much food and things there, but.
Mm-hmm. I bet if you do, that would be amazing. And this is so cool about what we do, right? So we work for companies, but we also have an adherence to what we do, right? So food safety, it's not a point of competition. And this information is information that benefits us all. So thanks, Joyce, for looking into that. I'll be very curious to see what you find. So as Duncan is saying here, I'd love to get a hold of copy. Yeah, so definitely. I will put that in the locals group. I'm pretty sure, Duncan, you're in that group. If not, the link's going to go in here as well. It's a free group, right? I just put information in there on recalls and all these type of things. And these things happen suddenly. So before we got on the show here, Joyce and I were talking a little bit about, so there's this Palmer's chocolate recall that happened on Monday. There's a white chocolate coating that's going on pretzels that has a contamination issue. And at the Trace Gains conference on Monday I was at, one of the participants was getting material from that supplier and thought that he may be pulled into that as well. Luckily not. So it looks like it's one of the ingredients that goes in that white chocolate. But again, on a risk standpoint, that white chocolate went into all kinds of products. So if you go on Food Safety News and look that up, this is a big one, big recall for salmonella. So to your point, Joyce, and you've said this several times, don't forget your suppliers, right? They have a huge impact. And that's why, supplier management and assessment in FSVP and your food safety plans, that's why it's a preventive control. And so, Cortland, don't forget global equivalence. Yeah. So what he's talking about here, what's ISO saying about this? What type of rules are in place for that? Looking at these international standards, Codex has been doing quite a bit of work on that. So don't forget that either. So part of the challenge, I think, Joyce, on this, and I referenced this a little bit ago, was overwhelm. Right? It's gonna be coming directly at us, right? So you have to kind of strategize around that. And I think that's kind of a good way to kind of bring our chat here back up to the 30,000 foot level is as you're thinking about this, right? And at this point in time, Joyce, you're kind of, it's, this deluge of information, we're all floating down the river and we're trying to figure this stuff out. What's kind of going through your mind at this point in time strategically as the head of quality for Eli's? How are you thinking about tackling this?
Well, we have an ERP system that, we can track things, but, I'm thinking about how we can somehow make, a code that consumers can interpret. Yeah. And, looking at our process, how are we transforming product? How does this affect our supplier? How does it affect us? And, just making sure, of course we have our paper system, but how can we make this so much better through our processes, not necessarily just through an ERP, but even at point of use throughout our process, where I can look at a snapshot at any point in the system and say, okay, this is what they're consuming. I know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And really, besides doing that, is really trying to collaborate with some other people, because the more we talk about it, it's like sometimes the light goes on, like, oh, I didn't think about that, because, Cortland and Duncan have brought up some really good points that I didn't think about. So, I really appreciate that, and just having the dialogue and really probably talking to the people that work in the company as well to make them understand what this is, because they're consumers of food as well.
Yeah.
So if you're a consumer, maybe you don't buy a cheesecake, maybe you're buying a box of cereal, or maybe cereal, maybe produce. Yeah. Maybe you're buying a salad at a store, or salad mix. What would you, if you got sick, what are you looking for on that product, so that that CDC, FDA can get you the information faster?
That's a really good point. And that could be a very nice action step for people. We all eat, right? We all go to the grocery store. Next time you're in the grocery store doing your shopping, put on your food safety hat. And when you're picking up that bag of mixed lettuce greens, the spring mix for your salads. Okay, here's an industry. It's not what I do, but this one is critical for food safety. The key data element holder, who's that going to be? Well, that's going to be that processor. That's going to be the person who's bringing in that different types of lettuce, washing them, putting them in that container. They're going to be the holder of the key data element. I wonder how they're doing that. Next step, what trade association would that group work with? Okay, well, the Produce Association. Okay, I'm going to reach out to those guys and see what they're doing. Okay? And you can go through the grocery store as you're doing your shopping and think about it for all of those FDA regulated products. How are these guys going to be doing that? Anytime that we can kind of get outside of our bubble and think about these things in the bigger context is going to help us put together a robust system. It's, as we were preparing for the chat, that whole e-commerce channel for me, it's like, oh, wow, right? A lot of times, to your point, Joyce, you're selling directly to the consumer. And if you have a retail store at your location where people can come in and pick up that cheesecake for the graduation for the family or a celebration, okay, how's that being handled? And can I expand upon how that's done within my thinking?
Something else that as I'm reading through, the standard is, we can do all these things, but we have to, like, specifically make sure we write this and draw them a map and a policy and procedure. I don't think our traceability policy is necessarily going to cover that. So that's one of the things that, that you make sure that you have this process written out for them. And I think they want you to identify your different CTLs and KDEs. I'll get used to these acronyms at some point, but they want you to spell that out.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, and so part of this then is doing low-level tests. It's like, okay, let's try and do this. Did that work? Is this meeting what my objectives are? No. Okay, I'm going to back off on it and try something a little bit different. Starting off small, like they do in software. There's a term in software development called MVP, minimum viable product. What is the simplest software system I can put together to meet that need of that consumer for this app or whatever it is? And then I'll expand on that over time. Same thing here, right? We don't need to be fancy. We need to figure out that thread that's running through everything, and then, okay, great. How are we going to track that? And then building the systems up. Cortland, yeah, too many acronyms. Yeah, we kill ourselves with acronyms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So fantastic. One of the things, Joyce, with new guests who come on the chat is I always warn that this hour goes by extremely fast. Did it?
Yes, I was a little nervous, like, oh, we're not going to have enough to take up 15 minutes, but yes. And I think it helps with, Duncan, Cortland, and a couple other people who have put some comments in there that have really taken the dialogue in a different direction, and just giving their input has also helped.
Oh, fantastic. No, totally agree. And so for people who don't have the link, here is the link to the locals group. And again, this is free, guys, and I post recalls and other interesting information in here. Sign up, and then you can get all that information, and I'll pass that on. I update that 2 or 3 times a week. So whenever I find new stuff, I'll throw that in there. So again, Joyce, thank you. What a fantastic discussion.
And thank you. And thank you to everyone who put their comments in. I think hopefully together as an industry, we'll hopefully figure this out together. We have 2 years.
Yep. So don't wait, right? Don't put it off. Start working on this now. This is what you need to be doing. You're thinking and figuring out how you're going to tackle this. And that's how you're successful. And so again, yeah, thank you, Cortland, everybody, Duncan, all the different people that have helped us out here with the chat today. We do this for you. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll bring our chat. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll bring this chat to a close here for this week. And don't forget, next week, we're back at the same time, and we live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And I'll have another amazing expert in food safety on the show to share their knowledge and expertise with you. So in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Have a great time. Get outside. It's gorgeous wherever you are, I'm sure. So we'll see you back here next week. And thank you again, Joyce. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.